Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. Not a massive weekend in terms of motorsport. I'm in another hotel. Not that matters either. There was World Rally Championship. There was Moto GP, Indycar, NASCAR seemed to be every single weekend. But let's kick off. No real gossip either. We like to kick off with a bit of gossip. There's nothing really going on. But
surely you can dig up Abu Dhabi again. Normally you do, Paul, every time for a bit of F1 controversy. There's no F1 controversy at all, I'm afraid. I did have a look for you to give you some little tidbit, but unfortunately, we're just going to look back at an exciting weekend across the globe, which we always like to bring up. I mean, the main headline was the World Rally Championship. Verstappen finished 60th. I mean, that is the shock news. If you want a bit of Formula One related, that's the best I could find, because Max Verstappen's father, Jos Verstappen, entered the rally in Belgium and finished 60th. He was actually 45 minutes down on his class lead, WRC 2. So anyway, he was having a bit of fun, Jos. He enjoyed his rally, I'm sure. And he finished, unlike many of the superstars, because the real shock of the World Rally Championship was Kalle Rovanperä, who people were talking about tying up the champion. Another win would have made me already the champion with about 5 rallies still to go. We had this massive roll on just the second stage. So that was the big shock first. But then he wasn't the only one to roll out, because Craig Breen had a big roll out as well. He was in tears. Craig wears his heart on his sleeve. I mean, Ford had a nightmare. I think that was on, was it day 2, I think. First of all, Gus Greensmith was in the ditch and broke the suspension of his Ford. And the same stage, Craig Breen rolled out. So it was a disaster for Ford. And it was left really to this battle with Hyundai, who was slowly coming back after a terrible start to the season, because Ott Tänak won the last rally. But Thierry Neuville, of course, the other Hyundai struggler, who hasn't won for a year or more, I don't think. And of course, he's the Belgian homegrown hero. And he got into the lead. It was those two versus the surviving Toyota of Elfyn. Elfyn was battling away in second place. But then Neuville, the Belgian...
Elfyn's always there or thereabouts.
Yeah, I know.
Quite, yeah.
Well, the story it sort of comes back to kill him later on, because Neuville had this 17-second lead, and then he put it in the ditch. These ditches are, I mean, the roads are about as wide as the cars. And they all cut the corners. And of course, the more cuts, the more dirt goes onto the tarmac. And so they don't really know what grip they've got, and both with, Kalle Rovanperä can't blame that, because he was the first on the road. So he had no marks to look at. But anyway, what the worst thing is, was it day 3 early on? Day 2. Evans had a 10-second penalty for checking in late at a stage. That's the standard thing if you're late. And he ended up losing the rally by about 5 seconds. So he battled, it was just Ott Tänak and him on the last day, the only ones that could win it. And he lost by 5 seconds. He had a 10-second penalty earlier in the rally. So it was a very tense finish. Although there are only about 5 of the World Rally cars actually finished, and the rest were all in ditches and restarting and rolling over. So it was quite a tense weekend.
And how good...
Papalappi was third in the other Toyota.
How good was Jos Verstappen back in the day?
Oh, Jos the boss. He was really quick in the lower singles here, but he didn't really get a good Grand Prix. He was one of these ones that promoted too quickly, a bit like Red Bull are doing now, to the Benetton. And he was stuck in the Benetton alongside... Who was he alongside? A superstar?
Schumacher.
Yeah, Mia Schumacher. Of course he was Schumacher. And so, Jos couldn't quite compare with Schumacher, and maybe he didn't have the same car. That's always the thing of those days. And there was this mysterious traction control going around Benettons and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, Jos didn't look good against Schumacher, but then who would? And so he went off, he embraced arrows. He was always wholehearted. He had a go everywhere. He was a good driver. So he was So quickly, top 4 drivers spring to mind: Senna, Schumacher, Hamilton, and Verstappen. I mean, Max, not Jos. Who would win in their prime out of those 4? Well, you can't say that. Once again, you're off on theorising. Well, Lewis is the best because he didn't use his car. He's never resorted to foul play to win a championship, which Verstappen and Senna did.
I'm not saying about winning championships. I'm not, because Lewis is the best in terms of winning championships. I'm saying who is the best driver? Who would have won out of those four in their prime together?
I think Senna is still the fastest. But best is a word that includes other dirty tactics. The fastest. Senna was probably the most naturally talented, mercurial, but a flawed genius.
Yeah, okay. I like that. Good answer, on the spot answer. Very good. I wonder what our listeners think. I think you're probably right. Schumacher clearly a phenomenal. Well, they're all a phenomenal talent, aren't they?
But another flawed genius, Schumacher. He also used his car as a weapon. So before we did the rallying, though, do you ever mention Chris Ingram and Craig Drew, British, 9th overall, 4th in class in Belgium. So the Brits are still. Chris Ingram's trying so hard as a privateer to. Hello, manufacturers. Hello, me. But anyway, terrible weekend for Ford. Good for Hyundai and average for Toyota.
Good stuff. So, World Superbikes. I saw Susie.
No, none. Moto GP. No, it was
Moto GP. I beg your pardon.
Around the Red Bull Ring. And it was another Ducati coming on stronger and stronger. And the Red Bull Ring's a bit of a, 3 straights and a few corners. And it's just Fabio Quartararo's got this championship lead. The French one is Yamaha. And in the top 6 on the grid, it was him and 5 Ducatis. So he valiantly battled the Italian Francesco Bagnaia, the factory Ducati driver. He was on pole and he won it. But he's now won 5 of the last 8 races, but the other 3's crashed out. So he's had this amazing season. He either wins it or bins it. He's currently on this run of bins because that was a hat trick. He won. That was a 3 on the trot. That he won, but Fabio Quartararo wouldn't give up. But he was, I think he was standing about 5th or 6th earlier on, but he battled past the other Ducatis and got to 2nd. So he's pretty much holding on to a big points lead. But Ducatis and Bagnaia's now thinking, maybe 6 rounds to go, maybe we can still get this big lead down. There's an amazing battle for second place. I said Jack Miller.
Hang on a minute. First place is won, isn't it? It's not going to. No one's going to catch him now.
Well, no, not necessarily.
Okay.
If he wins the next 6 rounds, I'm sure he'll win. So I haven't done a load for it.
That sounds like a Murray Walker quote.
It was a good battle, but it was a great battle for second. Though. Originally, it was Jack Miller or the other factory who challenged Bagnaia a while, then dropped away. But then, who was it? Another Italian on one of the private Ducatis, Jorge Martin. He went for second place, but dropped it, overtaking, and then Quartararo came through. So it's pretty exciting at the top end, although dominated by Bagnaia. Moto2 and Moto3 saw the son of Japan rise to the top of the podiums in both Moto2 and Moto3. With very impressive rise. In fact, the Moto3 race, Ayumi Sasaki, he took someone out at the British Grand Prix, big mistake. He got penalised with a double long loop, which I love these bikes, they can do this long loop. On the race with cars, there's probably not enough track to make long loops. Anyway, he was on pole and led away from the start. And his first long lap loop, because he has to take them within so many laps, he dropped to 20th. He was battling up again, he had to take his second long lap loop. I'm not sure how far he dropped back. Anyway, he came back through and won the Moto3 race. Funny enough, it wasn't a frantic, big, I was expecting around that track to be the big, bunch of Moto3, 20 of them all tying for the lead. It was actually quite a tame race in terms of dropping out. So he didn't pick up many places through crashes. But anyway, very impressive win by Ayumi Sasaki. The Brits, John McPhee got from 18th up to 9th. Scott Ogden, he qualified down in about 16th. I thought he'd finished 16th because I saw across the line, but he must have been penalised for track limits. He was classified 21st. But Moto2, as I said, was also a Japanese win for Ai Ogura, who goes top of the Moto2 championships by just 1 point.
Good pronunciations.
Getting there. The more I read these ones. Jake Dixon had a great. Our British, he's getting better and better, Jake Dixon. He qualified 4th, and he had some... He was talking after he suddenly dropped back to 8th, and then he explained he has a bit of wheel spins. They can remap their engine to give less torque and to change the torque maps. And I'll sort of reprogram his bike and racing. He dropped down to 8th. And then he sort of got it ready. On the last corner of the last lap, he took 3rd place off of Pedro Acosta, of course, the Moto3 superstar kid. So it was very impressive. So Jake Dixon, I don't know, he just gets better. Could he be Britain's next Moto GP rider? We need one. We haven't got any.
I like Jake. He wears his heart on his sleeve as well.
Huge smile always. Always a great green, right, happy, smiling teeth. And so, yeah, it's a goodish weekend for the Brits.
So it's a good, exciting weekend on two wheels of the Red Bull Ring. Not so exciting in America for NASCAR. How can you get excited about NASCAR?
Well, Indycar. Well, because sometimes it is very exciting. It's not every race. Whenever I try to promote it, you always tell me about boring races. The Formula One is boring. Even Moto GP has boring races. Every sport will have its boring races. I'm my God, was IndyCar boring this weekend. It really was one of the worst. And it surprises me. It's this Gateway Raceway near Illinois, St. Louis. It's 1.25, but it's very flat. And flat, so it's a single line, single groove. They actually got the teams out on Saturday doing deliberate two-lane testing to try and put more rubber down in the second lane. It was slightly banked, but not enough. But there was no crowd there. They got these big grandstands, and it looked terrible. I sort of think, why go there? What are you doing? I want someone from America, listen to this. I shall tweet it as well to try and attract an American to say, I don't see the point of racing when you know it's a bad track which is why probably nobody turns up. But there was such an empty field. Then halfway through it rained, so we had a rain delay. So then it all strung out. What crowd there was left had to hang around. It was dominated by the Penske pairing of Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin running out front most of the time. It wasn't enlightened right at the end. David Malukas, this star young American rookie who rides for the Dale Coyne team, a very small team, came pounding through, seemed to get the pace. He got second place off of Scott McLaughlin round the outside, risking it with about 2 laps to go, and actually was catching the leader, Newgarden. So there was some excitement.
Who was the biggest name ever to race in IndyCar?
Probably biggest name, like Mario Andretti.
Yeah. Who else?
Jacques Villeneuve won the championship, then came and won the Formula One championship. Lots. Pablo Montoya came from IndyCar. It was pretty impressive.
He's not a big name.
Juan Pablo Montoya. Don't you insult one of the greatest.
I'm not insulting.
I love Juan Pablo. He's a Grand Prix winner. That's good enough for me.
Okay.
So, Bar Brixton, Jack Harvey 40.
Alonso?
No, Fernando's gone the other way. So he did Indianapolis and impressed. So, Romain Grosjean had a bad weekend as well. He finished about 10th or 12th. So the talent is there. You're one of these people spreading this gossip that the IndyCar drivers aren't any good if they can't come over here.
I think the IndyCar drivers are phenomenal. I love the cars. I do actually like IndyCar action, but it wasn't a good weekend for IndyCar.
It was a dour. So please, America, why the hell go to Gateway Raceway when you've got no crowd and the racing's boring? NASCAR, however, went to Watkins Glen, and that's often, they don't go well around the road courses. They went to the Go Bowling at the Glen sponsored race, but it was raining and pouring. They do race on wet, so for the NASCAR boys, it was a bit of a challenge. So we thought we'd get a great race, and it actually was pretty exciting. I'm just seeing those NASCAR boys. They go all over every curb they go over. They can go over. There's no track limits in NASCAR. They just go wild and everywhere. So there was loads going on, but because it quickly dried out, the race was then rather messed up because you had to do a 2-stop because it was one of those races where it's either a 2-stop or a 3-stop. And so lots of people are going a bit slowly early on to eke out the fuel, which often makes for a very jumbled up race. It happens quite often in NASCAR. And apparently you had to do 18 laps to do a 2-stopper. But after 13 laps, the wet tyres were knackered because it was all dried out. So there's great racing going on, but then half the field pitted early because they went for the 2-stopper or the 3-stopper. I got confused. So halfway through the race, they were all over the place. But in the end, it was the Hendrick pairing of Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson who were first and second on the grid. They went for the 2-stopper, therefore they disappeared to midfield, mid-race. So you thought they're out of it, but then of course the 3-stoppers had to stop. So they ended up with the two of them out front, and it looked like Chase Elliott had the race won and Larson didn't have anything for him. But then they had a full course caution with 3 laps to go, and Larson dived up the inside. Well, in fact, Chase Elliott picked the left-hand side, going down into a tight right-hander. So I thought, he was questioned afterwards when he wasn't too happy because Kyle Larson dive bombed him. Well, he was level. He was maybe an inch ahead on the inside, but he pushed Elliott wide over the curbs, which they were doing anyway as part of the racing line. And Chase Elliott lost. He went back to 5th. So Larson won it. But it was one of those weird moments because his teammates going head to head. And it sort of Larson, when he came round, there was no donuts. It's this weird, that he's feeling guilty. And he just came to a slow halt across the finish line. And he almost had a frown on his face, thinking, I've done wrong, and I've done wrong to my teammate. And then they showed a shot of Chase Elliott was in the pit talking to Rick Hendrick, the car owner of both cars, and Jeff Gordon, the former superstar. He was there, and they're all a little huddle, and Elliott was obviously upset. And and Kyle hardly celebrated. He got out and waved at the crowd, and then he was interviewed.
And he hasn't won for a while either.
I know exactly. So he needs a win. We've got the playoffs coming up. But he was so sort of humble and worried that he'd upset his teammate. And then Chase Elliott was interviewed, and he just did this sarcastic. They do that quite often. Are you upset? Just no. I want to congratulate the 5 car and the Hendrick car for winning, and Kyle for winning a great race. Like any time, Did you not think that taking the left-hand lane wasn't a good idea, Chase? I took the right tactic for the day, and it was just stony. So it was a really weird feeling at the ending. But to me, Kyle, he wants to win races. They're different sponsors, they're teammates, but they're individuals. They're not under any team orders. And I would have done exactly what he did,
Anyone would have done exactly
the same. If you want to choose the left-hand lane, boy, going into a right-hand tight corner, then, that's your prerogative. But, of course, half the story that we were all looking for that was fun was Kimi was out there. Kimi Raikkonen was making his NASCAR debut. He qualified down in 27th, but with all this various fuel strategies, he was running 9th early on. In fact, he was ahead of Chase Elliott, the guy who was leading towards the end. But on a restart, just after he dropped right back in the field because he'd had his second fuel stop, he was taken out in a sort of just a shambles through the chicane, which ended up with him being punted into the wall innocently. So a bit of a shame. He was actually putting on a good show. So it was good fun to watch. Just them going around the road courses. It is entertaining, but a bit confusing due to the strategies. So and controversy at the end. So not the best American races.
Okay, so in the duller meter, IndyCar, how dull?
IndyCar was about 3 out of 10.
Okay,
IndyCar.
And NASCAR
was still 6, just to see those brutes being handled, and there was at the end Allmendinger, who's not doing the full NASCAR. He's doing the Xfinity, the Formula 2 series. He was a great road course racer, and he was catching Larson towards the end. Larson, of course, won the Xfinity race. Sometimes the NASCAR boys, the Formula 1 boys, drop to Formula 2, especially when it's road courses. They want to get more experience. So Larson actually won the Xfinity race the day before after 2 in front of him had a clash and crashed out. So Kyle had he swept the Glen, as they say, but he didn't look too happy. He didn't look happy. Broom in his hand, trophy in the other, but looking a bit like a guilty boy caught.
Well, I'm happy because next week we got some proper, not disparaging what went on this weekend, but we got some proper racing again this weekend that we like, the European stuff.
And I'll be the one in the hotel on the Monday. It's my turn in the hotel next week. I'm at Spa, going out there with some entertaining some corporate guests. So Motor Passion. Anyone want to go to Motor Passion Daytona? Great trip. Motorpassion.com. Whatever. Anyway, I'm out there having a great time. Really looking forward to it. Fabulous circuit. Got F1, F2, and F3. They've changed the circuit a bit with these runoffs, and especially the first corner hairpin, when now as you come out to go down the hill to Eau Rouge, there's a gravel trap. So whether that's going to, because normally lap 1, turn 1, if they don't hit each other at the apex, they then run wide and go where there's now a gravel trap. So that might cause a bit of controversy.
So do you think most of the crowd are going to be pro Lewis, and they're all going to be supporting Lewis?
yeah. Apart from the 100,000 Orange Army, the flares will be going, because of course Max is Belgian born with a Belgian mother, so he's perhaps more Belgian than the Dutch nationality takes to his father that he races under.
That's controversial. You're going to get a bit of stick on that one.
I think the Benelux countries are happy to co-own such a superstar. They've moved the bank back at Eau Rouge. And Radion at the top, which makes it safer because you can go less chance of hitting something and bouncing across the road. But if they don't police track limits up at the top at Radium, it's the left-hand apex at the top of the hill. It's the one where if you go over the curb, you can be 1 mile an hour, 2 miles an hour faster all the way up the straight and overtake. I watched some videos of a touring car event. They're all just over it and straight lining it. Because now they've moved the bank back at the top of the hill. So it's even harder coming up from Eau Rouge to actually see where you're supposed to go, because you're just going over the crest. But they've really got, if they start cutting that corner and not penalising them, I won't be happy. Yes, make it safer, great, safer. But we need precision to be rewarded. Therefore, you've got to stay on the track and be quick within the limit set.
What about sausage curbs? Because that's where Abby Eaton had her.
Well, I know that's why you can't have big curbs. Again, this is why it has to be just track limits. It has to be really, really strict. I mean, the motorbike boys, Moto GP, they've got the green that's at the edge of the curb, but if they just put 2 wheels on the green, they get a couple of warnings and then they get penalties.
See, but that's what I say. You say, no, don't do that, because then at the end it's really confusing.
Well, I
with the time
know. Well,
penalties.
it is. Well, I know what it is. That's the negative side of it. If the
do
penalties
it.
were being added up,
doing it.
I agree.
Everybody
the more
will
you get
know.
penalised, yeah, I know. Yeah. I agree. The more they get, we'll have a few chaotic, over penalised events, and then maybe the drivers will realise that this is the way we go. If you want a safe track, you've got to play with these rules, and if you just overstep the mark, you get penalised.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
What else is coming on this coming weekend?
Well, Daytona, the NASCAR boys are never boring at Daytona. It's usually boring for about an hour, then they have these huge multiple crashes, and it's very exciting. But this is the last round of the before the playoffs. And 15 people have won, and if you win, you're in the 16. So there's only one spot available on points, and that's the battle to the 12 and the 19 at the moment. But if some outsiders win those, because they're just lottery
win
races,
the whole race,
lottery races. So Martin Truex and the 12 of thingy, they could be put out if some unknown wins it. So it's a big thing for the playoffs. Who can survive the lottery? And they're just sitting there at 200 miles an hour, creeping. Hello, mate. I'm doing 1 mile an hour faster than you. Bump the one in front. Bump. And they, as I said last week, it's like being on a motorway jam on the M1, where the 3 lanes are all going at slightly different speeds, and you think, I want to change lane, and then you're going to make a gap. It's amazing tactics, and it's still fascinating to watch, because they're just sitting there, all full throttle. Everyone's full throttle in the draft and side drafting. So that's pretty exciting. And then back in Britain, we've got 2 great choices. The BTCC at Thruxton, which is always a great racing, the Porsches, the single-seaters, and the British Superbikes, which that was coming alive at Thruxton at Campbell Park, again with a mountain where they leap into the air. So just watching Superbikes, overtaking is a bit tricky around there, but still epic to watch British Superbikes. So good entertainment both in Europe, America, and at home this coming weekend.
Lovely. Well, thanks for joining, and we look forward to welcoming you again next weekend.
Cheers all.
Cheers.